Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the DucksNPucks podcast. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Well, welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Richard, and we have plenty of things to discuss with the Ducks. They, they went on a losing streak after our last show. We kind of pumped up the Ducks on the last show, and it kind of didn't go so well. But we'll talk about the Ducks road trip. They're now at home. They actually did win their last game against Pittsburgh and played well. Zegras is back. We'll talk about him. We've also got an interview from Silfverberg in the Swedish News, and then you got Cronin's response to that. Some stuff going on with the Ducks lineup, minor league trade as well. So we got all kinds of little things to cover on this show. We won't talk too much about the games, but more about the team and the overall performance and some of the stuff going on, and really, I guess, just the direction of the team overall. But, of course, before we start, Eddie, what are you drinking?
Michelob Ultra. Just got off work, so I'm trying to catch up to you, Mike. Yeah, nice cold Michelob Ultra. Nothing too crazy today. It's been a long week, so kind of take it easy and hopefully get a little head change faster as the show goes on. So how about you, Mike? I know I saw you were drinking Coors earlier, the banquet beer. I'm going to call you Johnny from Cobra Kai because he drinks those too. But what else are you drinking?
Yeah, that's well, I did have a Jocko vodka earlier, as you guys know, even though it's not a sponsor, but I love my Jockos. But yes, then I switched to a Coors Banquet. Like you, Eddie, I had a very, very long week, a very, very busy week. It's just been busy in general. A lot of stuff going on at work, a lot of changes going on, a lot of craziness. So, I just trying to mellow out on this Fridays as, we record the show. Like I said, we'll kind of talk about the road trip, I guess, a little bit and kind of what's going on with the team. And then, Zegras is back, which is the good news. The Ducks are still not playing as well, but maybe a little bit better as of late. Dive into that. I did get some glass seats at the game against Florida. We'll talk about that a little bit. The last show, we were talking about the Ducks and how they had won 4 out of 5 games against playoff teams, and everything was fantastic and great. And we were recording during the St. Louis Blues game. The Ducks fell on their face that game and lost 6-2. Then they lost to the Flyers 6-0. That road trip was just a complete disaster. They went 1-4-1. They got shut out in 3 of the 6 games, which is terrible. They then came back and lost to Florida again at home and then beat Pittsburgh. So it's kind of a wild ride. I mean, they haven't been playing as well as of late. And, of course, the Fire Cronin stuff has been coming out, and everybody's going nuts about that. No big surprise. I guess just kind of general thoughts, Eddie. We're not going to really dive into the individual games. You guys all watched them and everything. But just kind of your thoughts over this last road trip and the Ducks coming home. Like, what are you seeing, and kind of what are you thinking about with this team? In these last 6-7 games.
Hey, well, you know what? Let me go back to the glass seats because the last podcast we talked about, I was actually going to the Ontario Reign game that next day on the 10th, and I got to sit in the glass seats, and it was really fun. Good experience. And I throw it out there, too, because I'm trying to brag, but it's an AHL game, so you have me one up, Mike, on those. But my whole point is this, that AHL Ontario Reign team, and then I believe it was the Lightning affiliate team. Both those teams, those players had more heart in that one game than I've seen in a long time with the Ducks. Especially this road trip that came. They should have just stood in Anaheim. They shouldn't have even left and just took the L's and forfeit all those games. It was just a waste of time to be there, a waste of time for fans to watch, and it's an embarrassment. The product on the ice is complete trash and embarrassing. And I mentioned in the show, not to be negative, but I told you, it's just the teams they played against and the wins they were getting, minus the Winnipeg game, they were teams kind of struggling and having some issues. The Tampa, like I mentioned before in the show, they were having issues against California teams. I think only scoring 3 goals out of the 3 games they played. So Ducks really weren't playing that lights out really amazingly good. It was just they were capitalizing on struggling teams. And reality came back and hit, and they just got blown out this whole road trip. And it was pretty sad and embarrassing. And then the Philadelphia game, too. I posted on X, all these Philadelphia fans claim to be badass, big and bad, tough Broad Street bullies, but you're crying over a kid that didn't want to play for your organization. You got a stud defenseman back. they had to ban some signs from going in there, Mike, because people just couldn't have some decorum. Like, they were just acting like complete imbeciles. Like, save that for basketball or football, or go watch that if you want to be a piece of shit fan. But you're going to sit there and knock on a kid because he didn't want to play, and then acting like he just left you for nothing, like you didn't get a stud defenseman. Like, come on, that's just ridiculous. But it was just sad to see this road trip, really heartbreaking. Another issue too, Mike, I want to bring out, because there's been issues with players taking runs at Ducks players. More thing I'm talking about is one of the incidents with Gibson getting kind of bumped in behind his net. No one does anything to protect him, and then we have Lundestrom getting that knee-on-knee contact. I don't care if Reinhardt's a top player right now and a superstar. You got to just do some supplemental penalty and discipline, even though there wasn't a significant injury on long term. It's just like things like that can't be part of the game. You can't just intentionally stick your knee out and act like that's okay. But what was more disheartening, Mike, is the level of lack of heart for any of these Ducks players is disgusting. I'm embarrassed to wear my Duck stuff anymore after seeing things like that. You should go and have your teammates back. I don't give a damn if it's another suspension. If you break someone's jaw and you're suspended, who cares? At least you're showing your teammate that you have his back and you care about him. You're there to protect him. If I'm Lundestrom, I'd be wanting to get the hell out of Anaheim, not just because they're just trending downwards, but there's no guys camaraderie. Like, Mike, if someone hit you at one of the games or attacked you, I'd be the first one in there swinging, no questions asked. And that's the kind of brotherhood that teams should have. And the Ducks just don't seem to have that. And especially this whatever you call it, this road trip.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. The road trip wasn't good at all. And you're right. There's these incidences that happen, and you're like, okay, like with Lundestrom getting hit by Reinhardt. I mean, he got knocked out of the game. Both of them, were out. Reinhardt obviously got the 5-minute major, which the Ducks couldn't capitalize on the power play, which, we've known that the special teams has just been terrible, and 5-on-5 play. I mean, a lot of stuff's not going right for the Ducks anyways. But, yeah, you'd want to have each other's back. I mean, yeah, there was a scrum after that and everything. But, when I did get those glass seats for the game against Florida at home, I was really curious to see what would happen in that game and if the Ducks would do anything with Reinhardt, and they didn't. And even then, Reinhardt, scored an easy walk-in goal in the first period in that game. I didn't think the Ducks played terrible at home against Florida. They lost 5-2. They had a couple minutes of play in the first period and the third period where it didn't work out so well for them. But again, okay, this guy knocked your guy out in the previous game. Now you're at home. You're playing him again. Someone's got to crush this dude. Lay a body on him or something. You don't necessarily need to fight him, even though, if you had a George Peros or a Stu Grimson, Todd Ewan, one of those guys, you would think, yes, you'd have a guy that would just go out there and just rock this dude and crush him big time. But that guy was untouched the whole game. I mean, it's just disappointing. And you've seen that kind of theme with this team. And I'm not saying you take unnecessary penalties. I'm not saying you go out there and just kick someone's ass because you just want to do it. It's all about the ice justice, right? And you back each other up, like you said, Eddie. If we were playing and someone took a run at you, then yeah, I'm going to go take a run at them as well. And I just felt like nothing much happened with that. And you're right, in some of these games too, Gibson got knocked around. There wasn't really a lot there either. And that's kind of been a problem with this team the last couple of years, is what's the identity of this team? Where are we at? And that's the issue I've seen with these games. I did feel like this last game I went to against Pittsburgh, they did come out and they played fantastic. They got a goal early on. They were able to get another goal. They built the lead. They played well except for the second period, but then bounced back in the third period. I was kind of surprised. I really thought the Ducks were going to lose this game against Pittsburgh because the first 8 minutes they gave up 7 shots on goal. They didn't have any shots on goal. And then McTavish scores, and all of a sudden things turned around in that game. So I feel like with this team, a lot of it is dependent on the goals and whatnot, which is kind of interesting because it'll go into some of the comments about Cronin and Silfverberg that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But with this team, it just feels like they can't play 60 minutes, and they're super dependent on the score. So if they go up, then they're good. Right? If they, 3 or more goals, they're undefeated in regulation this season, right? They're 18-0-2 with 3 or more goals. If they score less than that, they've only won one time in regulation. So that's a huge thing too. The magic number 3 for them as well. And that's what's tough with this. And you're right. There's a lot of people. I've talked to people that are talking about canceling their tickets, and they're not happy with the team. They're talking about, you should say, fire Cronin at the games, which the last couple games there was a little bit of that, not really that strong that I saw. But that's the issue with the team is kind of, okay, where are we at right now? I feel like this team, you beat the Penguins 5-1 one night, but then, you lose the other night 5-2 to Florida and 3-0 to Florida. It's just like, I just don't know what kind of team we're going to get every night that they go on the ice, Eddie. That's just where I'm at right now. I just don't really know with this team, like what to expect.
Yeah, and you know what? Some of these games, Mike, they're really hard to watch. And the Ducks are they're a boring hockey team. And some games you'll have a great, like you said, it's just so inconsistent. You'll have some great games that the Ducks play. Other ones, I just want to shut it off, or I'll just go do something else, or go on my phone and just kind of just walk around and not really care what's going on in the game. Just care enough to talk about them with you on this podcast. But some of these games has just been outright boring and hard to watch. It's hard to say this as a Ducks fan because I want to love my team and I want to be going to games to be excited. It's like, I think the record of going to games, like I've been to more games that they lost than they've won. It just sucks having to drive back after a Ducks loss too, and then spending all my hard-earned money, just as well as your guys' all hard-earned money. You want to go and have a good time, at least have a decent product on the ice, and not just sit there and be like yawning or I don't know. Like, it's just, with the exception of the last game I believe we all went to against the Senators, that was like one of the only times that it was a fun game with the product on the ice being fun. Other times we have to entertain ourselves by opening as many beers as we can before the end of the second intermission. But I don't know what else is there to give on this team. You've done everything. You changed captaincies. You've changed coaches. You changed GMs. Like, what else does this team need to get a fire under their ass? Like, do you have to go in the locker room and light the locker room on fire just to spark this team and doing something? I don't know. This team has just been extremely bad the last few seasons, and once you had that glimmer of hope, they get it sucked away. Like, at this point, Mike, just call it the season. Just throw games. You get another third overall pick. Where obviously who's going to get the first overall this upcoming season. It's going to be Chicago. We already know that. It's already written in the stars. But I don't know. I don't know what else to do with this team. What else? How much more fans can take? And I don't blame the fans for getting frustrated and mad. Like, it's your right. It's your team, and you want them to be better. But there's nothing that really changes. It's just there's no accountability. It seems like on this team. It's just, oh, we're going to get better. It's all the same cute talk that Murray used to do, the politician talk where you promise everything and then nothing changes. That's what Murray was the best at, just making empty promises. And that's what this team kind of feels like. And it's sad. It's getting frustrating. It's just, they have good games too. Like, I did like the bounce back game in Carolina. I did like Cutter coming through and getting a couple goals right there. And the Pittsburgh one definitely came firing on that one. Pittsburgh's went through some goaltending issues too. We'll talk about, obviously, we're going to talk about trade stuff too. So everyone keeps linking Gibson to Pittsburgh due to the fact that he's from there, but that's highly unlikely. I don't think he would go to a team like Pittsburgh that's kind of on that cusp of rebuilding themselves. But I don't know what else we need to do to change this team. Like, do I just call it quits in Anaheim and relocate the team? Like, go to San Diego or I don't know, build a arena next to the Angel Stadium, call them the Los Angeles Ducks of Anaheim or something stupid like that. It's just getting ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is people are frustrated with the lineup, right? Obviously on defense, we've talked about the Hellison, Minty, and Zellweger, those guys getting rotated in all the time. That's been an issue. You guys all know about that. Now the issue, that's still an issue, but the other issue is with the forward lineup trying to figure out what to do. These last couple games with Zegras back, they've had Vetrano, Strome, and Terry together. Then you have Zegras, Carlson, and Killorn. I really don't understand that. I don't know why Killorn is with those guys. Then you had Gauthier with McTavish and Fabry in that game against Pittsburgh, and they worked out well and did fantastic. Then Harkins, Lundestrom, Leeson, also Johnson on the fourth line, and then, of course, McGinn's out, as we talked about. So, you're trying to figure out this lineup and try to get some stuff going. I don't know. Like, with McTavish, the big thing that a lot of people are talking about is center or wing. Should he play, those spots? Same thing with Zegras. And I think that's a huge issue with this team is you've got to figure out what are the two roles of these guys. I mean, Zegras is now back. The Ducks have won one of those 2 games. They, a little bit better on the power play, 1 out of 4. They were horrible without him. They only had 5 out of 58. That's just fucking terrible. But, what are you going to figure out? If you're still going to stick with Toronto, Strome, and Terry, who've done pretty well, they've been, a little bit cooled off lately, but who are your second and third lines on this team? And that's, I think, something that's got to be figured out. Where are you putting Zegras and where are you putting McTavish? If you're going Zegras and Carlson, Zegras at wing, I am good with that. Maybe you put Gauthier on the other wing and then Killorn with McTavish and Fabry. I don't know. You got to figure out something there because what they've been doing hasn't been working 100%. I thought Gauthier, McTavish, and Fabry did do pretty well in this game against Pittsburgh. So maybe you keep them. Maybe you put Leeson with Carlson, Zegras, and Killorn down to the 4th line or something. I mean, I don't know. You've got to figure out something with that, and that's where I think the issues come. A lot of people, and I'll hold a little bit of this till the little next segment. We still got a couple other things about the Ducks to talk about, but the stuff about Cronin, a lot of people are upset about comments from things in the past and other stuff like that. Fine, but I'm more concerned about the productivity of this team on the ice. They're in the bottom of the league, 5-on-5 in puck possession numbers. They're either at the bottom or close to it. Special teams, same thing, terrible. Goalies have been outstanding. Dostal and Gibson have been playing out of their complete mind. But I mean, we're over halfway through the season now. I mean, we're getting close to 2/3 of the way through the season now, and we don't know who the forward lines are. I mean, but besides Vatrano, Strome, and Terry, like, what are the other 3 lines? We don't know. And to me, like, we've discussed this. Of course, Zegras is out for a while, but we've discussed about chemistry is a big thing Eddie and I talk about and how these lines perform. And yes, you've got to mix around players. You've got to try to figure out things and see how they work. But once you're at game, we're almost at game 50 now, and you don't have this figured out, that's a huge problem. You should know who your top lines are. At least your top 6, or possibly your top 9. Your 4th line is kind of your throwaway line if it's your checking line or whoever else you got on there. But we don't have that figured out. And that's kind of an issue. And that's, McTavish in the post-game interviews after Pittsburgh was talking about that too, about building that chemistry and how the lines were felt. And they felt good in that game against the Penguins. But, I mean, I don't know. We'll see if Cronin keeps the line same or changes it going forward. But that's where I see the biggest struggle with this team is I feel like defense is one thing. We've got 7 guys you're trying to rotate in. Yes, you got to try and figure it out. The goalie situation is fine. But with the forwards, that's the issue. I just don't know what's the best answer for this team. And unfortunately, I don't think Cronin knows either. And we're over halfway through the season, Eddie. And it's just like you said, are we just going to keep going until we finish out the season and hopefully get a high pick? That's kind of what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, this whole rotation thing of the defensemen, I don't like it at all. We have some young defensemen that need playing time. That's really it's needed for their development. Defensemen are a little harder to develop into the players they're supposed to become than forwards are. And them playing one game and then rotating out the next, it's just I think that just hurts their development further. Yes, they are practicing with the team. They are getting that experience, but you have to play. You have to be put in situations on the ice and know how to overcome those adversities. And just sitting out, it kind of lacks them the experience. Send one of them down to San Diego or send 2 of them down to San Diego, bring some veteran ones, trade for a veteran one that you can rotate, being that kind of Clayton Stoner I'll mention because he was always that 7th defenseman that you can just have and rotate and have our younger guys go in San Diego and play. It's just I think it's kind of hurting their development. And with this constant rotation of lines, Mike, I think it's only been a few games where we've seen lines that are just there consistently. And like you mentioned too, the Cutter, the Mac, and the Fabry line, games that we've seen them play, it seems like they have that chemistry and that connection. When things start going south, I think Cronin's first thing is just to change everything up, like switch the lineup up and everything. So that gets really frustrating. And look at this lineup too, Mike. it's just hard to see who's an actual true elite center. We don't have any, and I don't think it's hard to say. Move these people to wing, move this guy to a wing. But we have to do something. It seems like there has to be kind of an odd man out or two, and hopefully the deadline they'll make some significant changes that may help this team get kind of a structured lineup and a little more chemistry. Because it seems like something's off with this lineup, and maybe it's Cronin. Maybe they just don't like playing for him, and everyone's in the dumps, or maybe just players are just tired of losing and they're tired of not being on a competitive team. I don't know what it is, but something has to give. His lineup's kind of horrible. But yeah, I'll stick with my main part though about the defense. We have to do something and stop sitting these kids out and benching them. That's not fair for their development. And then the goalies, Mike, you're right. The goalies have been playing out of their mind. If it wasn't for Doss and Gibson, we'd be chasing the bottom with San Jose and Chicago. But those goalies are playing lights out. Gibson's just showcasing himself, and I really hope a trade happens. We get a huge return because right now Gibson's value is going up, and if he had a better team in front of him, he'd be just. I think he'd be in it, maybe the top 5, maybe top 8 running for the Vezina Trophy if he actually played in front of a good team in front of him. Look what happened with Mackenzie Blackwood going to the Colorado Avalanche. He's been playing lights out. The last few games, he's kind of had a stutter, and he's lost the last 3, but he's still making good saves. He's still just not getting blown out. And that's what happens when you have a better team in front of you. So I hope the Ducks can get a huge return if they do decide to trade Gibson.
Yeah, I agree. If you send him to another team, I think he would play a lot better. And if the Ducks can get a big return right now with him the way he's doing, it would help. And that's what I'm kind of curious, because the Ducks did make some moves recently with this team. One should be happening soon, I guess I should say, and another one did happen. But they did send Pavel Regenda to San Jose for Justin Bailey. Kind of a minor thing, kind of more AHL guys. Maybe something that will, restart both of those guys a little bit. And then you had Elliot Freeman's report that they would possibly or should be signing Galimov, who's in the KHL right now. He's had over 20 goals this season. They kind of have to work something out with that one because there's no real agreement between the NHL and the KHL. So I don't know if it's something where he would have to finish the season there, then come here, or he gets bought out or whatever. I don't know, but they're talking about him. He's had some, really amazing goals. I know it's the KHL, it's not the NHL, but you can look at some highlight reels there. So I don't know if that's something where Verbeek's thinking bring him over and maybe provide some offense is what he's hoping. So there's been a couple of those little things that have gone on. The trade deadline, as Eddie mentioned, isn't until March, which will be interesting because in January we've got a few more games. February is very, very light schedule with the Four Nations thing. So I'm really curious to see what they do. I'm curious to see if they do trade like Dumoulin on defense, to get that rotation stopped. Like Eddie mentioned, you're rotating 3 young guys and they're not always getting in there, which is super frustrating on the blue line. And then the offense is not been doing what we thought. So the Ducks made a couple moves, but it hasn't been anything significant. So it's kind of where the team's at right now. They're also out with Brock McGinnis out now. He had reconstructive ACL surgery. He's out for at least 7 months, so he is done. So I wonder if the Galimov thing has something to do with that, maybe, and that's why they're trying to bring him over before the season ends. We'll have to wait and see on that. But even with that and the Regenda move, nothing really significant. But we've got another month or so to go, so I'm really curious to see what Verbeek does leading up to that trade deadline, Eddie.
Yeah, no, it's really different with the KHL. Like I don't know how that really works. I know Tony DeAngelo, he left his team for personal reasons, and he signed a contract with the Islanders today. But since he already played in the KHL, he has to go through waivers before he plays on the Ducks. Or I'm sorry, on the Islanders. Sorry, I don't want to flip out more Ducks fans. I don't know if it's something similar to that. I don't know if it's an age. I know he's 25, but we did sign him to. The Ducks did draft him, so I don't know if that matters or if, like you said, he has to be bought out. But while I was reading about the Tony DeAngelo, the signing, that since he already played over there and played in a different league, he would have to go through waivers before he can join the Islanders. So I don't know if that's something they have to wait for until the KHL season ends and they can bring him. I recall the Avalanche doing something similar to the last playoffs where they brought a KHL player after the KHL season ended, and he was able to play. I believe he played a game or two in the playoffs without going through waivers. That's something we have to look into. I know it's different with the KHL. I wish they would kind of structure these rules with other leagues and do it better. And I always mention too, Mike, I think the best thing that happened with the COVID shutdown and the COVID rules is a lot of these players that would have to go back to their junior teams, they were able to play in the AHL, and I think that was great because there's some players that are, I guess, junior eligible and have to go back to juniors if they get sent down, but they're way better than their junior team. It's kind of wasting their talent and development over there, but they're not good enough to be in the NHL yet. But it was a perfect example sending them to the AHL where they get that competitive seat. I wish they would change something like that and allow like exceptional statuses, kind of things like they do with the junior hockey league and signing players that are younger. I wish it'd be something similar to that. I think that would further develop and bring in a lot more talented defensemen, or I'm sorry, talented players on either team, whoever signs them. So I think that's something that's worth looking into for the league. And I hope they try to do something like that in the near future to kind of help properly develop these players and the superstars, especially too with the KHL, because I'm sure there's a lot of other good KHL players that can thrive over here. Kaprizov's one of them. He played most of his young career. I think he played 3 years in the KHL. Comes to Minnesota and he's lighting it up. He's a superstar already. So that's something that hopefully the league does something in the near future to help kind of grow the game that way.
Yeah, I agree exactly because with this Galimov thing, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, yes, they can sign him, but like, what's the deal? There's some things that have to be worked out there. But yeah, if he can come over and help the Ducks offensively, I am all for it. Real quick, I'm going to jump to one of our sponsors, and then we still got the Silfverberg stuff to talk about and some league news to talk about. But as you guys know, we're part of the Hockey Podcast Network, and DraftKings is one of our sponsors. Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? Better to get on it. The playoffs are here and time is running out. As the official daily sports sponsor of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like nobody else. You can win cash prizes on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play. $5, you get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. And stand by for this brief message.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice.
All right, and I know Eddie, we talked before the show about DraftKings, and you haven't had some good luck, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, so I know we had to read that little announcement thing. I guess I was too inebriated when I was in Arizona, so I thought like problem gambling, meaning like if you call, they can give you some like hints and tips on how to become a better gambler. That's not the case. It's if you have issues when you can't control your gambling. So, no, I'm just playing. No, I went to Arizona to see my mom with my brother and my family. So, it's cool over there. I was able to get to my DraftKings account. I mean, I don't go too crazy. I just I had a couple money saved up from last time, so I just probably bet another like $70, $75. I make small like $5 here, $10 there. So, my whole point is I lost every single bet I made. I think I was like 0-9, everything I made. And my last $5, I had a nice little parlay and lost that. And watching football, you know what, Mike? When you bet, and I'm not a crazy bettor. Like I don't go too nuts. Like I'll usually I'll have a limit to what I want to bet, and I'll drop that. If I lose it, and if I get free drinks, and that makes it worth it, so I don't have to feel bad about losing it. But yeah, I don't understand. Like betting's just, I don't know, Mike. It's fun when you bet. Like when I had like the little betting on the football, I don't really watch football, but it's more exciting to see. Okay, like while I was watching the Rams, I had the Rams winning. That was part of my parlay. And it was funny, like, watching them and how excited I was getting and cheering for them to win, even though they lost, which pissed me off. It's one of the
Me
nine.
too.
I know you were mad, Mike. I still can't believe that idiot's holding the ball with one hand when it's that snowy too. I'm like, what's going on? But they did fight back. That was cool, and they just couldn't do it. But I mean, I would have won the parlay if they would have won. And I mean, I bet small amount, so it wouldn't have been that. Like $10 bet would have turned to like almost $200, which is not bad for a $10 bet. But yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's fun. Do it responsibly. Yeah, and it's crazy too, Mike. So I'm in Arizona and I can use my DraftKings. I go across to Laughlin because my mom's close to Laughlin in Nevada, and I can't use it. It's just nuts. It's just crazy. And I don't know. I kind of hope they kind of legalize that in California. I don't know how they have it. There's all these different advertisements you see watching the Ducks games and sporting and betting, but you can't bet here. But you can bet on horses. That's weird. That's my little unhockey and my betting rant. So thanks DraftKings for having a nice app. The app's really easy to use, and I love it.
I love it, man. And yeah, you're right. It just depends on the jurisdiction you're in. Well, I guess one thing that you can bet on, Eddie, is for people to come out and talk about Cronin, former players. It seems like that's kind of the reoccurring theme. I thought we were done on the last show with this. I was kind of happy, I thought, with the Vetrano extension and his positive comments and the things that we'd seen, that we were done. But lo and behold, we weren't. You had the Swedish news outlet Expressen. They had an interview with Silfverberg. Thank you to Ricard Fresen. He sent me the whole article. It was one where you had to create an account and do all this funky stuff. And like you were talking about, like with different states, right, trying to do stuff on DraftKings. There's different states, international, or different countries, internationally trying to do stuff. So it was like trying to create this account and pay for some stuff, and it wasn't working. But thank God, Ricard, he sent me all the stuff. I did post an article with the full interview of Silfverberg from that outlet. I'm not going to go over it. It's somewhat lengthy. But the main part of it, which everybody's concerned, is the comments that Silfverberg said about Cronin. And then you had Andrew Knoll of LA Daily Sports, that he actually talked to Cronin after the game against Pittsburgh and asked him about it. So, shout out to Andrew Knoll. That guy's got huge ass balls because he asked about it. And a lot of these other people that cover the Ducks, it's kind of mundane or fluffy stuff. Or maybe more positive or just neutral. People don't, I don't know. I just don't feel like the people that cover the Ducks really ask any hard-hitting questions. And kind of Silfverberg alluded to that in his interview. He talked about how like he could walk around California and no one really pay attention to him. But now that he's back home, he's getting hit up all the time. So it's just a little bit different, right? I guess certain parts of Europe, they're really, really big on hockey. And then, back here in North America, Canada and America, or the United States, it just kind of depends where you're at. Some places they're really big, and some places not as much. But I thought it was interesting because he talked about Silfverberg, a game where the Ducks were getting blown out last year against Edmonton, and he had made a comment about Cronin taking a timeout. He said that he had looked at all the players and told them to look him in his eyes, and he said, he was really upset and he was yelling at him. And Silfverberg was kind of like, well, hey, what the hell are you doing? We're getting, run over in this game. You're trying to humiliate us, kind of a thing. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's in the article that I posted. Then he said that he, through translation, that he behaved like a, quote, idiot or jerk, depending on how you look at it. I know some people posted the word pig out there. That's not what he said. From the Swedish translation, it's idiot or jerk, which, still not positive, but those were the comments he said. So that blew up on social media before the Pittsburgh game. Everybody lost their mind, fire Cronin, all that stuff. You guys all heard all that, yada, yada, yada. Then you actually had Cronin getting asked by Andrew about Lyubushkin and Silfverberg and the comments they said, which I thought was fantastic. I love that Andrew asked that. Andrew hit him up, and the part about Silfverberg, he said, that he was just kind of made aware of it, and he was surprised that he was, that came back to that Edmonton game where they were losing, and that was during a timeout. And he said, quote, I was just trying to get the players to dig in and compete. The game was kind of getting ugly, and they were overwhelming us at times. And I do know that now. I do really have them, whether they're in front of me or the bench. I don't care what the score is when you're down. The message has got to be keep playing. That's the responsibility of the coaches and the players as well. I have a great relationship with Silver. I don't know what the context it was set in, but I respect him. He's a veteran. I think his words have value. So I did like the responses from Cronin on that. I like that Andrew asked those questions. The stuff about Silfverberg was last season, just like Lyubushkin. Cronin addressed the Lyubushkin thing too, and he actually said that Lyubushkin talked to him about that interview and said that was kind of taken out of context. So again, I posted that article. It's translated. Maybe that's taken out of context too. I don't know. Both these comments from Lyubushkin and Silfverberg are in foreign languages and then translated. Obviously, they're not positive. We all know that. That's not a debate about it, but kind of interesting. I mean, what did you think about all this, Eddie? Because you had Lyubushkin last year. You had Silfverberg last year. You had Yandel, but Yandel's story was 20 years ago, so I kind of discount that. And the spitting chiclet stuff, whatever. But kind of I don't know, just what do you think about this? Because I've seen different reactions from people. When the initial thing came out about Silfverberg, everybody lost their mind. And then when the video of Cronin responding was posted, and then of course I posted the article with the transcription and whatnot, some people kind of weren't as mad about Cronin, but still think he should be gone. And I'll throw it out there in a little bit about who should replace him, but I'll hold off on that just to kind of get what do you think initially with him answering those questions and Silverberg's comment? What's your take on all of that?
I don't know. I think, and it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Mike. How we've seen the Ducks play with zero heart on more games than they played with heart. We've seen them. I want to say this is the 4th or 5th year we've seen them just totally give up in games. It doesn't even look like they're trying to skate, heads down, not even putting any pressure. Like once they're defeated, they're done. Like you just, and it sucks to see. You're still a professional athlete getting paid a hell of a lot of money to play a sport that you love. Like pretty much, it's ridiculous that this has to come out. And if Silfverberg's really crying about this because you got yelled at and a little pee-pee whack, okay, who cares? You guys are down 5-0. At least have some pride, hold your head up, and get back in the effing game. Like, show that you belong to be in the biggest stage in hockey. It's the best league in the world, supposedly. And you're going to cry because he's making you guys look him in the eye so he can... And that's a thing of respect, too. Someone's going to be talking to you, your coach, your commander, someone. You look them in the eye like a man, like a professional athlete that you are. You don't just kick your head down and kind of pout. You do something about it. Silfverberg, nothing against him. I loved everything he did for the Ducks. I think that trade with Bobby Ryan, I think we kind of won the trade on that. We got another fan favorite. He did put up numbers, good numbers for us. I think better numbers than Bobby Ryan did with the Senators. Unfortunately, we lost Nolson after, a few games, and then Nick Ritchie didn't pan out. So it was kind of basically a 1-for-1. For Bobby Ryan, which was another fan favorite in Silfverberg. But the last 4 years of his contract, Mike, he didn't do anything. He's getting paid $5 million. Step up and being a leader. Obviously, you weren't, because if you were a true leader, maybe the C would have been put in your jersey. But maybe that's issues. Maybe there's other things. But, I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are. And if you're a veteran player or a rookie player, this coach is treating you guys all the same. He's trying to light a fire under your ass. You guys didn't react when Aikens was there, being nice and wiping your guys' asses. You guys still just didn't play with any heart or integrity or anything. Now you have a hard-ass coach. So it's like, I don't know what mixture and how many excuses these players are going to make and kind of blame everyone but themselves. But it's time to take accountability of your own product on the ice and what you're doing. Because there's only so far you can blame the coaches. Like, are we going to fire Cronin, bring in another coach? It's not going to work out. We're going to have people crying about it. Like, yeah, I don't know the full story here. I don't know what's going on and what prompted him. Like you said, this is kind of a third-party thing because this was translated, and a lot of these translations can get kind of screwed up and scrambled. I don't know, maybe I'll get Rosetta and learn Sweden, and I can translate it myself to see. But I don't know. I think it was just ridiculous to complain and cry about something that happened last year and hold on to that. It's like, why don't you just support your team that you were and just keep your mouth shut about it? And why even just try to mention it up? Just be like, hey, well, we had differences. I didn't like it. But to even say jerk, idiot, pig, or whatever the translation would be, I think that just speaks volumes to his character. It's just him still playing professional hockey. He's not being a professional. It seems like to me you're just being a whiny bitch. I get over it. And if you really guys, I don't know, it should have been handled differently. I did like Cronin's response, and I'm not saying that it's all the players' fault. Cronin's equally to blame. Obviously, his coaching style is not vibing well with the players, but what else do we need to do? Like, if you fans want to go and message us too and let us know what you think, what else should happen? Like, we changed coaching staff, players, GM. Do we fire? Do we try to get rid of the owners? Go pick it out in front of Anaheim, Honda Center, and just try to get the owners fired and bring someone else in, or wait. What do we need to do? Because I'm out of options. I'm thinking what this team are making excuses for them, and it seems like these players, the last two that did had a little issue, I think they're so used to being coaches kind of babying them and kind of like wiping their ass. Like I said, they just weren't used to someone getting in the grill and kind of holding them accountable for their lack of product and heart on the ice.
Yeah, you hit on a couple things there too that I thought were important. The whole fact that people used to be upset with Akins because they thought he was too buddy-buddy with the players. He, coached a lot of them at the AHL, then he came up to the Ducks to the NHL, and he was too soft, is what some people said. Now it's Cronin's too hard. So, I mean, I'm like, I crack up because I read the stuff on X, and I don't go on there as much. I usually just post stuff and then kind of like get out of there, except during games. I try not to look at too much of the commentary on there because I feel like people on X are bipolar. I don't know what's going on that platform. I think people are losing their mind, and there's people that said that they were going to leave the platform, and now they're still back on there, and they're mad that the platform's negative, but yet they're posting negative stuff. So like I don't really know what's going on that platform. I just my little tangent on that. It's just kind of like all over the place. But you're right. So what do you do with the team? How do you fix the team? Everybody says fire Cronin. They don't give an answer. Okay, cool. Fire Cronin. That's why I posted on X before the show. Well, who do you want as the coach? Because that's how I'm tired of people just saying, well, fire him. Cool. That's great. Okay, cool. Now what? What are we going to do? Also, how far are you going to take this, as you alluded to, Eddie? Are we ever going to talk about Verbeek or the owners on this team? Are we just going to sit there and blame Cronin for all this? Because to me, Verbeek's partially to blame too. The comments that Silfverberg made and Lyubushkin made, and some of this other stuff coming out on Spitting Chicklets, if this stuff was all known at the end of last season, and yes, they had a horrible season, they were losing, all this stuff was going on, Silfverberg said he lost his motivation to play, Lyubushkin said similar things, then why did Verbeek keep Cronin after the end of last season? He should have fired him in the summer and put someone in at the end of last season, before the season. But he didn't do that. So now we're stuck. So where are we at now? What do we do now? That's my question. It's easy to point out problems and issues, but it's not as easy to come up with solutions. So what is the solution? What do the Ducks do? And that's why I asked you guys, hey, who should be the coach? Who should they bring in? Because no one's really offered that up. I've heard a lot of people, all over the place talking about the stuff about get rid of Cronin. Things aren't going right. As far as the on-ice performance, I really don't care about the Silfverberg, Lyubushkin comments. I don't really give a fuck what the Spitting Chicklets say either. I really don't care. I don't, because all that stuff's in the past. I have still not heard a player from this season say anything. And granted, they probably won't because they're on the team. But you've had former players saying stuff, and some dude back in college. Sorry, Yandel, but your story's whatever. It's 20 years ago. I'm not trying to discount them 100%, but this is all stuff that happened in the past. I haven't heard anything currently. So take all that stuff, put that in a little box, and file that away, okay? Like, I'm not saying get rid of it and completely dismiss it. It is important. Yes, there are criticisms of the coach. Yes, there are issues on that end. My concern is the on-ice product. What is going on today? And it's not working. That's where I am concerned, as Eddie and I have talked about on this show. And last show we kind of talked about how well they were doing, and then, of course, they blew up against St. Louis. But what do we do? How do we fix this team? If it's not the owners and it's not Verbeek and it's the coach, okay, what are we going to do here? We're at the end of January. There's not many games in February. We got the Four Nations thing. We got a lot of games in March, and pretty much the Ducks season's over at the beginning of April. So whether you bring somebody in now, which I don't know if that's the answer because there's not a lot of hockey left, or you bring somebody in the summer, who do you bring in? And that's the thing that I've brought up. And some of you provided some good answers. There's some answers that Eddie and I have talked about. So I'll throw some of them out there, and we can talk about it. We talked about Bruce Boudreau. Should the Ducks bring him back? Bruce Boudreau, great regular season coach, get the Ducks into the playoffs, and we had trouble, especially in Game 7s. McIlvaine, down in San Diego. Do you bring him up? Then you've got two names that I've seen a lot of you guys have thrown out there. Have been David Carl from Denver University, winning 30 wins in the last 3 seasons, 2 championships. And then you've got Jay Woodcroft from Edmonton, 2 great seasons in 2021, 22, and then 22-23. And then he got booted the following season. Was also the assistant coach for the Canadian team in the IIHF. So those are kind of some names I've thrown out there. There may be some other names out there, some other people that you guys would want to throw in there and bring. So that's my thing is we have to improve the on-ice product. We all know that this team is failing in every single category imaginable, whether it's regular stats, analytical stats, whatever stats you want to look at. Tell you blue in the face. The Ducks are terrible at all this stuff, except for the goalies, right? We that's bar none. We all know that. So my question is do you bring in a coach, towards the end of the season of summer, which we can debate about that, but if Carlisle's not the guy down the road in the future, which Eddie and I have said that multiple times on the show, based upon the on-ice performance, not even about these comments by other players and other podcasts and whatever, who do you bring in? Like, you looking at these names I've thrown at Eddie, do you like any of those names? Some of those are names you and I have come up. Some of those are names that you, the fans listening to the show, have come up. Or are there other people out there? Like, what do you think? Like, who would you move on from for Cronin? Like, what do you think?
Mike Walters. I'd bring him. Mike. No, you know what, Mike? Bruce Boudreau, I'm sorry. No, I mean, as drunk as I get sometimes, I never have the anticipation to call an ex-girlfriend. You get back with them. I always make that analogy, but it's not going to work. Like, let's stop trying to do the old Ducks way and bring back an ex-coach. It's not going to work. I think Bruce Boudreau and I guess a special teams or an assistant coach, I think he was a really good regular season coach and did help the special teams, whatever input he had on that. But when it came to playoffs, he had some questionable lineup changes and things that just didn't work out. And like I said, just move on from him. I mean, obviously, he tried coaching already with Vancouver, and it didn't work out then. I think it's time to get someone new. McIlvaine in San Diego. See, the issue with that is you bring him up to the Ducks, you got to replace him in San Diego. And not only are the Ducks players are going to learn a brand new system in the middle of the season, you're going to have and screw with the goals development and have to learn a new system in the middle of the season. I don't think that's going to work. I think it's going to hinder their development just to try to change up what they learned already from this one coach. And who knows? I don't follow the goals as much as I should or want to. I don't have the time to do that. But I don't know if he has that chemistry and he's molding them and developing them right. And that can hinder their development too. David Carl is a good name to think, but do you really want to bring in a college coach? Yes, he did have the success, but it's a big jump from going to college to coaching in the NHL. Now, he'd be an option to coach the goals next year if we do promote from the goals for a head coach, but I don't think it's going to work. I did throw the name I mentioned was Sergei Fedorov. He did coach in the KHL recently, 3 seasons. He coached in the championships for back-to-back years. He had a bad year, year 3. They got eliminated from the first round of the playoffs. He got fired, and I don't know, maybe bring someone like him in, or I see. I'm not on the fire Cronin train right now because I just don't want to kind of bring in a new coach right now. If you're going to fire him, do the offseason. Start fresh. Have Verbeek talk to the team. Okay, look, we're bringing in new coaching staff. We're starting fresh. Everyone take the summer, reevaluate. If you really want to be on this team and be here. If you don't, let me know, and I'll trade you. Just like Buffalo does. Buffalo gets a lot of slack, but their GM's about, if you don't want to play here, let me know, and I'll get rid of you. I'll get you out of here. He wants players that want to be there, and that helps with the winning culture. And I think that's something better for this team in the long run than firing Cronin right now, bringing in a temporary coach, firing him, in the offseason or midway through next season. It doesn't seem like it's feasible and it won't work. And it's kind of Verbeek really has to gear to these players, and like I said, have that conversation with them and let them know, like, okay, well, it's not working out with this coach. We're going to bring another one. If that doesn't happen, then what do we go from there? Maybe it's time to move on from a lot of the players that are supposed to be core players for this team, and just kind of which I hate to say, and I don't know, Mike. I'd probably have to go to AA because I'd be a full blown alcoholic if this happens again. But maybe just blow this team up and start from the bottom again, from scratch with a brand new GM, and not trying to clean up, I guess, what Murray has done. But I just don't know how much more, and I don't know how much more Ducks fans are going to take. I know a lot of people, and you mentioned it too. A lot of people canceled their season tickets because of the product on the ice. The games aren't selling out. When you go to the high profile games of other teams, more of them are there. More Kings fans are there. Like, this team has the potential to be a great team. They have the talent and the skill, but no one's rising to that occasion, and something has to give. I don't think right now is the best option to bring in a new coach, Mike. I think people sometimes think that hockey's easy and you can just do what the St. Louis Blues did, fire a coach in January, and then all of a sudden you're going to be a cup contending and win the Stanley Cup. It doesn't work that way. This team's not going to the playoffs at all, and I mentioned that too when they had their winning streak. This team just has a lot more issues than the coach.
Yeah, you're right. We talked about that winning streak, and yeah, we were up on the team, but it was cautiously optimistic because we talked about their 5-on-5 play, still, how they had issues. The special team still had issues. They got timely scoring then. Of course, the goalies have been rock solid, like we said. So it's like, what do you do? Like you mentioned, you're the GM, and what's going on with this team right now? Do you bring in one of these people? You talked about, McElvain. That's the issue too. Like you said, you bring him up. Okay, now you need someone in San Diego. Do you recycle and bring back a Boudreaux? Okay, or you look at some of these other guys, outside. How are you going to try and do that? Because here's the issue. It's a tough spot, I think, for Verbeek because you've got a guy in there that's not getting this rebuild and stuff going like you want to do. So it's easy to sit there and say fire him, and I'm not against that. I'm not against what everybody's saying. But now the question is how do you get this team going forward from there? I mean, if you bring in someone else, are you setting back this rebuild more? That's the concern I see with who you bring in. So can you bring in someone that's going to immediately make this team a contender, get them, towards the playoffs and do what they're going to do? To me, no matter who you bring in right now, it's not going to happen. This team, and you mentioned it, you and I said it back in the beginning, and we knew at the beginning of the season that they weren't going to be a playoff team. We did say, hey, they could get close. During that winning streak, I think they were 7 or 8 points out somewhere in there. And then obviously after this last 2 weeks, they're not in it and they're not going to be in it. So what do you do, right? And that's what a lot of you asked. I had Maverick 87, is Cronin helping or hurting the Ducks? The Swamp Father on Instagram asked, what does this team need to become a cup contender, coaching elite players? I feel it's a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, I feel it's a few different things with this team. I feel like they need some other players that are going to help. They need like a Kachuk type guy, right? A Kessler type guy. Those kind of guys. They need a guy that's going to go out there, kick ass, take names, and play 60 minutes of kick ass hockey, blue line to blue line. And like Kessler was that for the Ducks. And of course he had all his hip stuff and all that things happen. You have a Kachuk that's out there doing that. And yes, there's other big name guys out there that most likely the Ducks aren't going to get, like McDavid and stuff like that. Whether you like or hate his personality, whatever. And we're actually going to talk about him in a minute because he got suspended and was crying like a little bitch. But he was crying. So we'll get to that with our league news here, and that's the next segment. We'll wrap it up. But that's the thing to look at. You bring someone in, are they going to fix this team immediately overnight? If there's somebody out there that you really think that can do it, then yes, let's do it. I just don't know who that is. Could it be a Boudreaux? Maybe. McElvain? No, I don't think so. Carl down in Denver? No, he's doing great in Denver, don't get me wrong. Woodcroft? I don't know. I mean, he did do well in Edmonton for a couple seasons and then got booted. He kind of had a short leash. I think it was only 13, 14 games he got booted in the 23-24 season. So that's what I'm looking at there. But I'll give you the final thought, Eddie, and then we can kind of switch gears and talk about some of the league news and wrap up here.
Well, like you said too, it's not going to happen overnight. It's changing the coach right now is not going to fix the problems. It's just a lot more internal problems with this team that one coach or one player is going to solve. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. So I don't, like I said, I don't know what solution that we need, but something drastically needs to change. This is like, now you're hitting to that point where you're almost as bad as Buffalo, San Jose. You'll always be above the piece of shit the Blackhawks, because their sexual assault scandals back in the day. But you're still that bad. And like I mentioned to New Jersey years ago, and then most recent Nashville, try to fix their team and be a better team in free agency, and that backfired on them, bringing in the free agents that they did bring in, and both of which, Marchessault and Stamkos, that the Ducks try to get to before signing with Nashville. You have to bring in not just the best players on paper who you think they're going to fill your seats. You got to bring in the right players that are going to gel with everybody, that's going to kind of make that brotherhood and bond stronger. And as far as the Swamp Fathers question too, I did want to touch on this one. We need to bring in elite players. We need a franchise player, because we thought it was going to be Zegras, but he's dealing with a lot of injury problems. We have players that have the potential to be superstars, elite, or a franchise player, but none of them are stepping up to the game. We need a franchise player, and that's going to be a hell of a lot to get in free agency. I know there's another name out there that's been mentioned that I mentioned on the previous shows, and then now the big media is talking about it. So we'll talk about that when we discuss this in a little bit. But yeah, I think we need just to bring in the right players and do something. But the culture in Anaheim has to change. This whole Orange Country thing, this stupid thing they just kind of pump down our throat to. It's just, I don't know. It's just not gelling. Everything is just a complete disaster and train wreck. It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. All those things put together, I mean, what are you going to do? You've got to fix this. And I think one of the things is, like you said, you don't have a guy in the team that is that superstar. You know, I really miss Ryan Getzlaf. Sorry, I do. I miss Ryan Getzlaf. I do like Gudas. Don't get me wrong. You guys all know that my better half, that's her favorite player. I do think he is solid overall. He has made some mistakes getting out of position. I do think that sometimes he tries to go for the big hit and misses. He also does land a lot of big hits. But, I mean, he's not a Ryan Getzlaf. Let's be honest. He's just not. I mean, I love him. I think he's more positive than negative, though at times he does get caught out of position because of his over-aggressiveness a little bit. But, kind of talking about this league news, it kind of goes into that and what Eddie's talking about. You've got, I think we've mentioned this before too, you've got Rantanen that's out there, and you've got several teams connected to him through the rumors, including the Ducks. So that's one player to look at. Another one we did touch on a little bit earlier in the show too is Pittsburgh. Looks like they're going on a full-on fire sale. I saw multiple reports. That's my second favorite team, as you guys know, about them saying that almost like everybody is free on that team to be traded. So I'm like, okay, and then there have been people talking about bringing back Rickard Rakell. I don't know if that's the answer or not. I'm not, kind of 50-50 on that, but you've got Malkin on the team. Is Crosby available? Like what are we doing here? Like how far is Pittsburgh going to blow their team up? So I'm really curious now to watch them at the trade deadline as well. Colorado and Rantanen. The goalie situation, I want to see what's going to happen with that. If Gibson gets moved. So you've got some things out there that can happen. The Ducks can make some moves, and there may be some players available. We talked about Elias Peterson, the craziness going on in Vancouver. That's another team to watch. So, I mean, there's an opportunity at this trade deadline. If the Ducks don't move Cronin, they keep him till the end of the season. But there's an opportunity to get some big-name players. We're still way under the cap, and add them to the team, and, let's go. And that's what I feel. And I know Verbeek tried. I know he tried to get Stamkos. I know he tried to get Marchessault. So, to me, I don't know. And I did do that poll. I put it out there for you guys on Twitter or X or whatever, for you guys to grade him A, B, C, or D. And a majority of you gave him a C, But a lot of you said it was because of the coaching. It wasn't because of the drafting of the players. So I that's where I feel. I feel like he's between a B and a C. So I feel like this trade deadline is super important for this franchise, Eddie, because like you mentioned, if they can get one of these big name players to come on the team and help out, I think it would be tremendous. So, it's just, there's a big opportunity there. Bring in some people and help get this team going in the right direction. I'm really curious, especially with Vancouver, especially with Pittsburgh, to see what's going to happen come this trade deadline.
Oh, definitely. And the whole Mikko Rantanen thing, a guy he could be the Ducks franchise player, but it's going to be, it's not one of those things where it's going to be a deadline move. It's going to cost huge, and I don't think the Avalanche are willing to let him part ways until the very end. And the Avalanche are in a really terrible spot too, Mike, because they risk the chance of losing him for nothing, which we've seen teams have done that before, and that can cost you your job as a GM. And I don't think President Joe Sakic will sit there and I think let McFarland, their GM, keep their job. You lose a player like Rantanen, absolutely nothing. So I really think a deal will get done. The cap is raising 9%, $9 million next season, the largest ever. So they have the money to afford them. The issue is that internal cap, they don't want. He wants a certain dollar amount. The Avs are a different dollar amount. So that's going to be interesting. And I just don't know. I think other teams, if he were to get traded, I think the Avs would want a kind of a player to his caliber in return, and the Ducks unfortunately don't have that player in his caliber. And we mentioned Gibson too, but they already have Mackenzie Blackwood. They signed him to an extension. I think he's their goalie, and he's the goalie they want to rely on for the future, so we can kind of count that out. And there's not really any other player that can be in the mix. I mean, if you want to bring in a player like Rantanen, you're going to have to throw in a couple first-round draft picks. You're going to have to throw in a Zegras, maybe a McTavish, one of our defensemen that you don't want to give up, one of our young ones. It's not going to be easy to get a player like that at the trade deadline from the Avalanche, or any a player like that of Rantanen's caliber at the deadline, because you've seen these prices go just crazy sky high. I think the Ducks could have had a solid player trading with New York for Kakko. I don't know if they had any talks with them. I know they had talks with them last season to acquire him, but for what Seattle, I believe, gave up, I don't think it would have been impossible for the Ducks to get a player like that. And he's actually doing really well over there. So I think it was more of an internal problem with the Rangers, which are having some issues. They are doing better this season, or I'm sorry, as of late, but they've been having their issues too. But I don't know, like the trade deadline, like you said, Mike, and you made that, and once you said that, I just totally agree. This is going to be one of the most important trade deadlines for this franchise, to see what we do, who we bring in. Verbeek had the issues bringing in free agents, and we spoke about this on numerous shows. It's hard to be players in California. It's just the climate over here. Players, and if I were a player, I wouldn't play in California. I'm saying that right now. I'd sign to a different state and have a better quality of life and no state tax. But I do hope Verbeek will take advantage of this whole pain. What's it called again, Mike? What he did with Vetrano, kind of move deferred payment.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope he takes advantage of that deferred payment to lure players, free agents that want to sign here but don't want to spend all the money on the taxes, and just to do a deferred payment. And so once these players are done, or once they go somewhere else, so they have that time frame where they can get that money. I think it's a smart thing. I know the NHL hates it, and they're going to do anything in their power to get rid of that. So I hope that he can take advantage of that before they do that, before they kind of roll that out in the next little CBA meeting. But I think that's a thing that I'd probably grade, but maybe a C plus for Verbeek, a C plus for him to actually have that creativity. And yeah, he's a GM. He makes the trades, and the trades and signing happen. But I know there's a lot of financial advisors, accountants that actually helped kind of construct that too. So kudos to them for making that happen. So we got to wait and see, Mike. I guess it's I'm probably not excited, and more concerned and worried about this trade deadline to see. Usually we're kind of hit or miss with the Ducks, but I think this is going to be one of the one for the history books. And I want to throw out there too, Mike, that Ryan Getzlaf was the best, and I think will go down as the greatest captain in Anaheim Ducks history.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's definitely way up there for sure. And some people have asked about him too coming back to coach the team. We've talked about players coming back, but I don't see that happening. he's out in Nashville. You know, people ask about Teemu. I don't see that either. Niedermeyer, I don't either. Niedermeyer, another one that obviously a great captain. We won the Stanley Cup. So I'm really curious to see what happens at this trade deadline. I think it's huge, and I think like you said, it's a good point. They did the Vetrano contract with that. Maybe that was something that Verbeek wanted to do, to be like, hey, come trade deadline. Like, listen, you can still come play for us at Anaheim. We'll structure your contract to somehow lessen the burden of the taxes, because they're crazy in this state, and get some of those players, because you had Stamkos and Marchessault both go to Nashville, no state income tax state. Just like, you know, Florida's been like that. You got Nevada. That's why the Knights benefit from that as well. Texas is also another state. As I mentioned, Tennessee. So you've got some of these states that benefit from that. So if Verbeek can do that at the trade deadline before, like you mentioned, the NHL comes down on them, because there's reports out there that the NHL doesn't like these, Ohtani type contracts, and wants to put it into him. So I'm if I'm Verbeek, I really, really try to make some big ass moves this trade deadline and pump up the team. And that's where I think we go, because right now, no matter who's in the lineup, it's not working. The only other option, you and I have talked about ad nauseum on the show, is you boot out the coach and you bring in someone else. But I mean, that's where they're at right now. It's a difficult spot for this team. It's very tough. I know the fans are frustrated. They're not happy. Those of you that joked about the new jerseys at the beginning of the season, the on ice stuff, and how you want a better product on the ice, well, you guys aren't wrong. Those of you that were very critical at the beginning and had some not so happy words, I get it. I hear you. It's tough. It's tough to be enthusiastic about a team just because you have on ice projectors and new jerseys and things like that. Which, I mean, I love all those. I think they're awesome. But obviously, there's just more to that, Eddie.
Oh yeah, I just a little less focusing on the cosmetics of it, and you should have fixed this team. I don't know. I think it was. I don't know. They should have waited. This team was better. It's just sad to see how bad the Ducks are playing with those beautiful jerseys. Hopefully they just tone down on the orange a little bit going forward. Maybe make a little tweak. But no, Mike, I agree with everything you said. You've hit everything spot on. And like I said, I just feel bad for all the fans too. You and I included. It's just having to watch this team just kind of falter the way they are. It's hard to. And it's hard to kind of like stomach at times. Like, man, I know a lot of us too, Mike. Like this is our outlet. Like we have jobs, we have. I know a lot of people with the whole inauguration and the political stuff. Sports gets you out of all that environment and just puts you in a different zone. And it's hard to like. And I know a lot of people, and I go through issues mentally. I go through personal stuff. And sometimes I want to just sit there and relax and watch the Ducks, watch my team play. It just gets frustrating. It's like, oh, man, another kind of failure, another thing. It's like, I'm just going to go to bed. Like, I'd rather just shut the game off, get some ice cream, and go to bed. But, yeah, I know this isn't forever. I know hopefully it doesn't turn into like a Buffalo Sabres kind of thing. But I know something, hopefully, like you said, I'm really, let's try to like hold off until the deadline and see what happens and hopefully get a few wins. I want to throw a question out, Mike, real quick while we're ending the show. Where do you realistically see and want the Ducks to be once that 82 game is over, like in the standings?
I go back to what you and I talked about at the beginning of the season. I just hope that they're around 500, to be honest. I mean, that's what I would like. I mean, of course, I'd like them to be better, right? They're a few games under 500 right now. People have talked about it too, how the Ducks have done better this year in terms of points. I think they're about 10 points better than where they were at this point last year, but they have had more overtime losses that have kind of helped out. So they're not overall doing really that much better. But at this point for me, 500 is where I think that they might land. But part of it too, like you mentioned on the show, is like if they start losing games and get closer to a higher draft pick, I really wouldn't be that upset. But I don't want this like tailspin like last season where they're just getting blown out every game and it's just so difficult to watch. And this season it has not been that way for most of it until this last road trip. And this last road trip, they got shut out 3 of these games. They hadn't been shut out all season, and then it went downhill. So for me, I want them competitive every night, obviously playing close games. Big picture, if they're closer to 500, cool. But if they're playing competitive games every night and they end up losing but get a higher draft pick, I'm actually okay with that for this time around. Unless, like I said, they make some big splashes at the deadline.
Yeah, I'll be happy if they end up bottom 10, obviously, for that pick. But I like anything lower than bottom 10, like 9, 8, 7, 6, and I'd be kind of upset because bottom 10, okay, you do see that improvement in points and wins. But Mike, too, what irritates me is when I'm watching the Ducks play and they get an overtime loss. It's like, okay, well, you got an unnecessary point that you don't need. You don't need to be moving up. And if you're going to go to overtime, I just hope you win. But, yeah, I don't know why the overtime loss. That just irritates the living hell out of me. So, yeah, I mean, at least we're not, like, point-wise, I think we're doing better this season than last season and where we are in the standings. So I guess that's a positive. Who knows? Maybe the Ducks play a little better. Maybe that road trip. I mean, they came back from the road trip and, well, they still got shut out once, but they did play good against Pittsburgh. So that's a positive. And you know what? About Pittsburgh, too, I want to throw out there. The Dolvajic, that goalie from Pittsburgh that got blown out by the Ducks. In one of the games, he was the first goalie ever in the NHL to have a goal and an assist in a game. And the first goalie ever to score in the NHL, AHL, and ECHL. So, like, he made the history books, but he's just been really inconsistent for them. So, I guess it's kind of a fun stat if you're into hockey and stuff like that. And, like, just like the news around the league.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that is a feat, pretty interesting being able to do that. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see what Pittsburgh does too as well. So we'll kind of have to keep an eye on everything that's going to happen. The Ducks, there'll be like 2 more weeks of games. We'll probably have a show and then maybe take a break in February with the Four Nations and then kind of be back maybe closer to the trade deadline unless something happens. So another thing, we are also sponsored by Old City Sports Network. Check out all the sponsors in the description box. So, we're part of them as well, in addition to the Hockey Podcast Network. So, with that, I've got really nothing else, unless you got any final thoughts, Eddie, and we'll wrap up the show here.
No, just everyone keep your head up. I hope you guys have a good, everyone's having a good start of 2025, even though we're almost done with that already in January. I mean, the month of January. Yeah, just kind of pretty much that's all there is to happen, and hopefully our next podcast we can start talking about a little more positive things about the games, about the Ducks, and they do something that's going to say. I just hope that no other former players come out and say anything bad, because that's the third person, then obviously we got to start talking and believing the players. But yeah, next podcast we'll recap the games, talk about anything else, and probably go into more depth about the Four Nations tournament that's coming up.
Yeah, exactly. And like we said, we'll keep our eye. If something comes up, last minute, we'll jump on something sooner too as well. So appreciate all you listening and hang in there. And let's go Ducks.